Hi, my name's Sean John. I'm a security strategist at Symantec. My job's to deal with customers in the UK, talking to them about security challenges, issues, and how Symantec can maybe help with that. Here to talk a little bit about the Internet Security Threat Report that we're releasing, which is basically our analysis of all the threats and trends that we've seen over the last year, basically for 2011, looking at what the trends are in the industry and what we're seeing in terms of attacks and threats happening. So there's a few key things. We're seeing that continuing expansion of malware that's happening, the different variants of malware, the different attacks. Malware's still going up through the roof. We're seeing a move in the way targeted attacks are happening. We always think of them as being something that goes after big organisations. They're now going a lot more after smaller organisations. To be able to think, I'm small, I'm not going to be a victim of a targeted attack is a lot harder to do nowadays. We're also seeing, data loss is also a continuing growth that's happening, lots more data loss is happening, identity breaches, things like that. And then finally, mobile attacks, mobile malware. Although it's very small, it's quite significant, and we're seeing a big growth. And we actually think if you look back, 2011 is going to be the year where you see that those threats started to become real. That's absolutely true, yeah. We saw a lot less vulnerabilities last year than we've seen historically, and yet we actually blocked 5.5 billion attacks. And considering the year before, in 2010, we only did 3 billion. That's like over a 40% increase in 2011, and yet the number of vulnerabilities we're seeing in the operating systems has dropped. So it's a case of what we're seeing is that people are writing attack toolkits and then they're using them to exploit known vulnerabilities more. So you're seeing a lot more variants, a lot more attacks, but not necessarily a lot more new vulnerabilities as well. As you've seen with the news of the recent weeks, Macs are vulnerable. We're seeing a large amount of increase. We've seen quite a few attacks against Macs and recently attacks against Java. And what we're seeing now is people are writing them much more in ways that they'll work regardless of the platform, whether it's Windows, Mac. They're basically going to write it in a cross-platform way, which basically reflects the fact that people don't necessarily have a one standards device. We're not all sitting there on Windows laptops anymore. And so they're moving that way, they're writing out attacks, and we expect that's going to increase. There's no longer a way of saying, I'm running a key secure platform. So as for mobile devices, although it's still quite a low figure, we saw a very big increase in the number of vulnerabilities and attacks on those as well. So it's massive amount of attacks, we're seeing attacks. And then the interesting thing is where you looked at what happened with PCs, where it was a gradual growth of threats, and early on what was being seen on a PC system was quite, it's more of a nuisance attack than a genuine attack. With mobile devices, what we're seeing is it's going straight towards a way of doing monetization of those attacks, how to do things. Over half the attacks we see on mobile devices are basically tracking user behavior, collecting data about the device, and about 20% of those are actually looking to monetize it and send text. And what they're doing is setting up premium rate services, infecting a system, and then getting the infected mobile to basically text them and earning money that way. So they've sort of skipped all the doing it to see if I can situation to go straight to the monetization of that, which reflects the fact that that's where malware is now. So effectively, whatever platform they're going to look at how they can make money and turn a profit out of running that malware. Well, so the information comes from that global intelligence network for everything you see. So it comes from monitoring of the anti-malware technology that we've got in space, our .cloud infrastructure, which is monitoring about a third of the world's email, from our managed security services, which are looking after enterprises security, monitoring what's going on there, and then also from our threat and vulnerability intelligence service. So what we do is we take all that data, and then once a year we sit down and do a full analytical analysis of that to see what the trends are and how things are changing over time. I think the biggest thing is that change in targeted attacks. So there's a few assumptions that we make about targeted attacks that are really been proved to be false. So one of them is that targeted attacks only go after large organisations, or particularly the government. About 70% of the attacks we're seeing are against private sector organisations, and over half of those attacks are against companies that are less than 2,500 employees, and also they're 80% are against people with less than 250. So that idea of I'm a small company, targeted attacks is a big company problem, that's just not the case anymore. I mean, speculating about why that might be, it might be because those small companies are working with the large companies that are targets, or it may just be that they're going after people that have got low-hanging fruit, and we're all doing more digitally online now as well. The other thing about the target attacks as well is historically it's always been, they go after the senior exec and the important people. The other change we've seen is a move towards targeting more of the information workers. So nearly 60% of the attacks we saw were targeted at people working in HR, in sales, in recruitment. People are used to getting unsolicited attachments that they would then open. Because we're now training employees, don't open an attachment unless you know where it came from. What they're doing is now actually using the mechanisms where people expect to get an attachment and then sending the infection that way, so that then it's their job to open attachments, so they're going to do it. And then the final one that's really quite interesting and a bit of a surprise is the drop in spam that we've seen this year. So for the last 4 or 5 years, spam's been about 90 to 92% of all the internet email traffic we've seen. It's down to about 75% this year. So massive, dramatic drop in the amount of spam we've seen, but not a drop in the amount of targeted attacks. And that's because what we're looking at is an increase in the amount of use of social media. So they're moving away from spam on email towards social media, where people are just used to opening links, exploiting that trust that people have got in social media, using shortened URLs. So it's a new link. And if you look at a lot of younger people today as well, they tend to not use email, they tend to use social media to communicate anyway. So cloud storage is a great opportunity and a great advantage, but it does give new challenges that you've got to think about in terms of doing that storage. How to make sure you've got the right policy and control and the same level of control you would have on a cloud storage device as with your own. The same with mobile. Although I talked about malware variants of mobile, the biggest challenge of mobile is still the fact that you put data on it, you walk around, and the biggest cost of data loss for organisations is still lost and stolen USB keys, mobile devices. And as we store more and more mobile, then we've got more data loss from that. The same with cloud. The more you're putting into that, the more we're going to expect. And what we're going to see over the next few years is just an expansion of that, an expansion of both mobile and cloud. And the two of those really very much work together as a trend to make things happen. And they're just things you've got to think about. How do I protect my information given that it's not in my closed, secured organisation now, and that regardless of the size of what organisation I am, I might be a target of an attack. You can't say, I'm not the target of that, that's not me, that's other people. Think about, what if it were me? Play what if a little bit more. Make sure you do the basics well, because if you don't do the basics well, you're going to be got after it. And then prioritise how you can invest to make sure that you're protecting, given that you don't know whether you're going to be an attack, and you don't necessarily always have control over the mechanisms and where people are. Great, thank you, thanks.